All right, welcome everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm your host, Kyle Rasmussen. And today I have with me Amy, who is the owner of Guide Guides. Amy, how are you today?
I'm pretty good. How are you guys doing over there?
Doing well, doing well. We were just, talking before we hopped on here that it's a little cold and rainy and gray over here, and I think it's somewhat similar over where you're at too.
Yeah, I think we're both located in places that are famous for that kind of weather.
Yeah. Yep, definitely, definitely. Well, I'm really excited to talk about some of your travel experiences and your life is like as a tour
Cool.
director and guide. So it should be a fun conversation.
I hope so.
All right, perfect. Well, why don't we start out with just kind of share with the listeners, what is Guide Guides and how did that kind of get started?
Well, like so many other things in my life, it happened by accident. And I just went with it. Well, since 2017, I've been doing it officially and in a certified manner. I am a tour guide and tour director. And anybody who's in this industry recognizes the fact that it tends to be a seasonal job. And so we're always looking for ways in which we can supplement our travel addiction in our off seasons, our quote unquote off seasons. And so I decided to try and find ways that would allow me to kind of combine a business approach and hopefully an income approach with my nerdy, geeky fashion or passion for research, new destinations, new locations, new histories. And so a lot of the tours that I've been designing with guides come out of that.
Okay, awesome. And I really like the virtual tours that you have. How did that
Yes.
kind of start?
Well, again, it kind of happened when it was least expected. I had visited London for the very first time, and I am a fanatic when it comes to ancient Roman history and the remnants of it that might still exist. And I discovered
Mhm.
during my first visit to London that not only was the city founded by the Romans, but there were still some amazing ruins left that could be seen, but we had to really hunt for them because there just didn't seem like anybody who had put together any sort of tour, whether a casual one or a formal one, that would allow me to kind of research everything all at once. So I just went right down those rabbit holes and I collected a whole bunch of information. And every time I go into the city, I'd visit another little spot until I realized that I wanted to share this with other people who were just as nerdy as I was. And I looked for different ways that I could do that. And this was pre-pandemic, so it wasn't really when people had truly come into an awareness of how virtual travel could be a tremendous opportunity. But
Mhm.
it was still this tiny little niche idea, and I explored different platforms that would allow me to do it because I am not a tech savvy individual. I wanted to find something that was as accident supporting as possible, and yet would still be easily accessible to the general public. So I found this really cool platform that encouraged that really provided me with the technology. Somebody else was doing the technology. All I had to do was to sit and have this conversation and record it. And then I did that. I did this for the Roman Wall Walk, I called it, in London,
Mhm.
and I walked people along the remains of the Roman wall that actually the city of London still uses as its boundaries to this day. Um,
Wow.
and had so much fun doing it. And that led right into the pandemic times. And I thought, ooh, now more and more people are looking at these virtual tours as something that's not just an occasional fun, but almost this need, this outlet to explore when they're stuck at home. And so I decided to start expanding on that and taking advantage of the notes that I already had for some of the places that I was familiar with. And I've started turning, I think I've got 6 or 7 out there now. Um, and it's been this really interesting mix of feeding my own addictions and hopefully encouraging other people to develop some.
Yeah, I love that. Uh, it's kind of interesting that you started that before COVID. Did you see or did you see a lot of growth with the virtual tours during the
Oh,
pandemic?
yes. And the irony is that, and I understand why, a lot of people in my community, my tour guiding community, were quite nervous about that at first because they thought, oh gosh, how in the world can a digital based tour experience possibly compare to a live one? Nobody's going to enjoy
Mhm.
this. And if they do, oh my gosh, we're going to be out of a job. So there was this incredible anxiety connected to the idea, but we started realizing how it was an incredible opportunity to reach people who weren't able to meet up with us in person. And that has
Mhm.
really continued beyond the pandemic because not everyone has the time or the finances or sometimes even the courage, and that's fair, to just buy a plane ticket, hop on a train, take off to a different destination, but they still have an interest. They still have an eagerness to learn about it and to talk to somebody about it. And there's so many different versions of virtual tours now. You can do them live, you can visit them recorded, you can do audio tours, video tours. There's ways that you can do them as groups. We did some as a family. We did some where we had the whole thing broadcast live on the television in our living room, and the kids were interacting. It
Oh,
was one of
wow.
Harry Potter, um, visit the Harry Potter movie filming locations, and it was a group tour. And the tour guide was chatting with the kids the whole time and answering their questions. So it really has some phenomenal opportunity built right into it, regardless of the format. But
Mhm.
we were able to go places that we never would have been able to go during the pandemic. And since then, I've gone to, I've gone to, I've gone through a palace in St. Petersburg. I've gone swimming with dolphins in Kenya. I mean, there's so many different things that I can do that then I learn from, but I don't necessarily have to be in there in person um,
Mhm.
if I have limits for some sort of reason.
Yeah, well, to me, I mean, it's such a great idea because it makes it so accessible for everyone to be able to travel to
Exactly.
these places.
Exactly. And what I've discovered is that there's a lot of people out there who do require a fair amount of building up of courage to take
Mhm.
on big adventures. And some of these opportunities really build that up for them. It gives them an opportunity to test the waters, to experiment with something that they're really overwhelmed by the idea of. And they'll start moving closer and closer to fulfilling the dream of actually purchasing that ticket and getting on that plane or that train.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure too with with some places, especially in the new era of travel since COVID, some places aren't as accessible.
Yep,
Maybe we can't actually get to them, um,
still an issue,
depending
yeah.
on our status too. So yeah, it really opens up the world in just a new way. So I really love that. When I first went on your website, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a great idea. Why didn't I think about it?
Well, more and more people are. And I'm experimenting still too. I've kind of dipped my toes in the audio and the video recorded virtual tours, but there's some really interesting formats out there now that allow you to do the live stuff. Um,
Mhm.
so I need to be a little bit more bold with that. I've got some anxieties that I have to overcome when it's connected to technology. So I can relate to that. I can
Yeah.
relate to nerves and how that limits us sometimes in taking on what we want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Um, does it does it take a lot of work to build these guides, the virtual tours and audio tours for people?
It does. Let me say that's actually my answer should be more it's mixed. If
Okay.
you are super comfortable with technology, it's not. There is a bit of a hurdle when it comes to figuring out how to use even the platform that's provided to me. And because I
Mhm.
do these maybe twice or three times a year, my memory fades, and I almost feel like I'm starting a new one each time. And I really need somebody to kind of refresh my memory when I start it up. But I would say the fun part and the easy part is coming up with the script and figuring
Mhm.
out what I want to share with people, how I want to share it. That is super exciting. And you kind of build off of that. Once you've gotten the script, once you've gotten the ideas that you want to share, then you come up with, okay, the hurdle of the technology, let me get through that. But I've got this great story I want to tell, so it's worth the pain and anxiety of the technology hurdles.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. What's the process like to create a script?
Well, for the places that I have not been guiding yet, it's a little bit more time consuming because you have to
Mhm.
imagine what the best routes would be. I do have a fair amount of experience. My go-to city, my favorite city, is Washington, D.C. That's where I got my start as a tour guide, and it's where my comfort zone is because I've done so many tours already. So I have a sense of flow of what the sequence is for the locations that I want to share based on the story I want to share, because you don't just want to tell these fragmented bits and pieces of facts or
Mhm.
random stories. When you're trying to put together an overarching narrative, that's the most fun and that's the most interesting. So you tend to look at the location, you come up with the theme that you want to share, you come up with the way in which it's not that different from writing a story. You have to have a plot, you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then
Mhm.
you kind of overlay that on the geography where these stories are taking place.
Okay. Yeah, and speaking of stories, I saw that you're a children's book author. Is that right?
Yes, that was a fun random experiment as well, because um, I have had over the years, I don't have children of my own, but I have a wildly large number of nieces, nephews, godchildren, friends and family that just I have fun with. And we've always gotten into a habit, these kids and I, of making up stories. And one day I thought, you know what? I want to just put one together for this one particular child in my life that we had shared and kind of created together. And again, it was kind of an experiment. I wanted to see what it would be like to self publish and
Mhm.
what the process was. So I just dove right into it. I found an illustrator, put the story together in a bit more of a structured way than just a bedtime sitting next to the kid and and going back and forth, and then found a way to do it with audio as well. And I think that was kind of my gateway into audio files and the technology of how easily it is to share those. Once you've got a book in your hand, there's definitely a funness or an entertainment factor in reading in your head, but the out loud aspect of it, the hearing of the voices, the making the different characters with little kids, that's the fun part, right?
Yeah.
Imagine as you're talking what their voice would sound like and how they would respond to the other people. And when I saw how wonderfully recording an audio file would then allow that to be shared over and over and over again, and how that child could hear me share that story and tell that story, whether I was sitting next to them giving them a bedtime story or I was on the opposite side of the ocean. So that's really what got me quite excited about how the recorded voice would be perpetually telling a story instead of just occasionally in person.
Hmm. Yeah, that's I love that. I love that so much. I mean, you can be there with your family in a sense,
Right.
even though you are on the other side of the world.
And that's not easy for those of us who choose lives of adventure and
Hmm.
the types of lifestyles that we live to have that part of our life so alive. You have to be away from your family and friends for so long, and you can come and you can go, but you're always feeling a little homesick for somebody.
Yeah, yeah. I know that's kind of how I started a lot of my, travel stuff. Is just
Yeah,
I'd been getting requests from family members of, can you send updates, or can you explain this place, or just keep me updated on what your travels
sure.
are. I want
Yeah.
some context on the pictures and things like that. So I was like, well, let me start talking about it and start, making videos that put it all together, and have, me explain what I was thinking in that moment and that sort of thing. It's been fun to see people really enjoy, kind of experiencing it along with me
Yes.
as well.
Yes. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. How shareable it becomes when
Hmm.
you make use of the technology that way.
Yeah, I think it makes it easier to relate back with your family too. I know one of the biggest struggles I have traveling is coming home and kind of experiencing that reverse culture shock, and realizing that people don't really care about the travels as much as I care about what I just
Right.
experienced. And so
Right.
it makes it easy to share those experiences with them, so they have a little bit of an understanding.
And if you can do it, like you said, with video or audio in the moment that you're experiencing it, or near as near as possible to that, the excitement
Hmm.
is in your voice. The excitement is in the expression on your face. And it's easier to relay that joy when they can see and hear it more in the moment. Then, you come back, like you said, you come back from these trips and there's the inevitable, oh, yeah, nobody's excited as I am. And how do I get them to understand how this
Yeah.
has impacted me?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think technology has just skyrocketed in the creative ways that we can use it to express that, so that the
Hmm.
joy is palpable.
Yeah, yeah. It makes it so much easier now. And I'm excited to see what happens in the future with all of that too.
It's only gonna get more and more creative.
Yeah. So how did you become a tour guide? What made you decide to become a tour guide?
You want me to introduce another accident
Yeah,
here?
of course.
Yet another left turn instead of a right. Well, I had been doing the job without realizing it was the job for years. I started out as an educator teaching, and then I shifted over the years to administration and teaching. Kind of did a mix, and I was doing this in international schools, and so many of them were in these great locations that allowed me to teach history hands on. Like, I was living in Egypt for most of this time, and
Oh,
I
wow.
could take my kids to the pyramids. They could literally touch what we were studying in the textbooks. And that's a rarity for history, to make history hands on.
Mhm.
So I was creating a lot of these, for lack of a better term, field trips, but really they became interactive learning units. And bit by bit, the kids were getting so responsive to it, and it was impacting so many other areas of their learning experiences, that teachers and other subjects would come up to me and say, "Hey, that unit that you're going to be doing in a couple months, can we find a way to build it into the math curriculum or the English curriculum? Or can I parallel a project at the same time you're doing that?" And so over the last couple of schools that I was working at, the very, very last one hired me specifically to build a, I guess you would call it, well, we called it School Without Walls. It was a program that was designed to have the kids still officially be in school for that week, but yet they were required to be going out and about on trips, whether it be as local as the city that they were in, or if they went internationally or something in between, and do activities and visit locations that built into what they were learning in the different classroom subjects.
Mhm.
And so I was the one who was kind of coordinating all of that, developing the programs that would amalgamate all these different aspects and working with the travel guides and the tour guides and the tour managers and the hotels and flights and.
Hmm.
So I was doing that for quite a few years. And then things got a little bit crazy in Egypt for a while. They decided to have a revolution.
Hmm.
And over the course of a couple of years, it became more and more difficult for me to stay as as a non-Egyptian. And there's all sorts of politics that went into it. But essentially, eventually in 2016, I realized I had to leave. And I said, I'm going to just take a gap year. I'm going to find another place to go, another country, and I'll continue doing this educational stuff after a year's break. But in the meantime, I'm going to travel. I'm going to enjoy the things, the places that I have been teaching. I'm going to go across Europe. And so I came up on this really wild idea. I found an ancient medieval pilgrimage path that ran from London, well, Canterbury, officially, Canterbury, England, to Rome. And since 900, the year 900, people had been walking through it. It's similar to the idea of the Camino del Santiago that a lot of people are
Hmm.
more familiar with, but it's much older. The Camino del Santiago kind of replaced the pilgrimage path of the Via Francigena once the Via Francigena was no longer safe to travel on.
Hmm.
So I did that. And I had so many absolutely wonderful and so many absolutely horrible experiences during the course of the 3 months that I did that, that I walked away from it saying, I can't just have travel occasionally in my life. I have to do this more regularly. I have to find a way to get more people to do this. So that's when I looked into officially turning myself into a certified tour guide and tour manager. So that's kind of the really weird, not so nutshell, sideways manner that I got into it.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely all over the place there, but um, I mean, it seems like it
Zigzag.
worked out okay.
Well,
Uh,
I think if you talk to other tour guides, you're rarely going to come across people who nowadays who say, I decided when I was young that I was going to be a tour guide, and I, finished high school or I finished college and I went right into it. Most of us come at it sideways. Most of us discover it as an opportunity to do somewhere along the lines, and it somehow feeds other passions that we have already.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. What was the? I have a lot of questions from what you just said, but sticking with the tour guiding for now. Um, what is the process to becoming a certified tour guide? Is there certain rules in different countries, or is it there like a universal rules that you have to follow?
There is absolutely nothing universal. Which and actually, not only is it country by country, it very often can be, like for the example of the United States, state by state or even city by city.
Hmm.
Um, the United States, it's easier to get started in an official certified manner than it is, say, for example, in Europe, because the certification process is a much quicker method. In the US, there's really only a handful of certification organizations, and they're usually 3 to 4 week programs. They're quite manageable time wise, and
Okay.
they tend to be, I don't want to say gateways in the sense of that you have to walk through them in order to get to the other side and get to the tour guiding world professionally, but they're definitely gateways in the sense of they're they're showing you what's on the other side. They're
Hmm.
introducing you to what the potentials are, and they give you a foundation. So there are in the US only, well, in the region I tend to stay on the East Coast and even the Northeast. And in that region that I'm familiar with, that I'm experienced with, there's only two cities that expect tour guides to be certified. And that is New York and Washington, D.C. The
Oh,
other
that is awesome.
cities, those are the cities that you actually have to have a license in hand. Technically, it's not realistic, but technically, the authorities can walk up to anybody in those cities who is leading a group and say, "Show me your ID." But that is rare. Even in the years since I've had it, I have not had anybody other than an employer asking me to do that. Now, there's also different employment methods that you can use or you can approach as a tour guide. You can work completely independently. You can say, I live in Memphis and I love country music and I want to focus on all of the amazing things in Memphis. And so you can be a local guide. You can be someone that when anybody comes to Memphis, they seek you out, and you can advertise yourself as an individual business, or you can hire yourself out as an independent contractor to companies that bring guests in. So the companies are responsible for finding the guests. And once they've got a group, they contact you and say, "Hey, we're going to be in town on these dates. Are you available?"
Mm-hmm.
So you can approach it that way. My experience is more along the lines of working what they call over the road tours. And that's when you are hired by a company, a tour operating company. They organize the groups, they organize the itinerary, and then they bring you on to ride along with a group from city to city and kind of be the, well, this is an old fashioned term, but the den mother, or,
Mm-hmm.
the caretaker of that group as you go from place to place.
Yeah.
And you're not only talking about the history, you're not only telling the stories about the different characters, but you're also checking them into the hotels. You're also making
Mm-hmm.
sure the dinner reservations are confirmed and managing kind of the logistical aspects of things as well. And that's when you shift away from being just a tour guide and your label tends to become something like a tour director or a tour manager.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've been on a few of those tours where they have someone like that,
Yes.
which I think is really a nice way to do things.
It takes a lot of anxiety and worry off of the traveler.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. I'm sure it's a lot of work for the actual tour director themselves. I know you're in charge of so many people, but
It
um,
is, but we do it because we like it, right? We do it
mhm.
because you get all the good stuff as well as the frustrating stuff, and the good stuff tends to outweigh the tedious.
Yeah. Do you uh, is there a place where you can seek out these companies that are looking for these tour directors or guides, or do they just come to you?
There is no one database. Wouldn't that be lovely if there was?
Yeah.
This is where the certification programs really come in, or even just in the short amount of time that I've been doing this, there have been a handful of not just certification programs, but what they call destination training companies, excuse me, that have popped up where when you sign up to be a part of them, they introduce you to these companies,
Mhm.
whether it be formally through conferences that they arrange, kind of like a mixture of a job fair and a travel geek uh, conference, or whether it be I know some of them, they actually have, again, since COVID, a lot of online virtual meetings where a lot of these companies will come to one of these meetings to present who they are, to introduce where their destinations are, the type of jobs that they are hiring for. And then
Mhm.
you meet them virtually and you send in your resume if you're interested. It's like a vetting process of sorts.
Mhm.
But so much of this industry really is word of mouth and really is getting to know the personalities, um, and working for one company, getting a good reputation amongst them, and then working for another company and having them be referencing one another. Some of the friends of mine that I went through the certification program with, we were a class of, I think, 25. There are now 6 of us remaining who are still actively working in the career, but we are all working in different companies, and at the same time we overlap now and then, because they'll say, hey, I've been working with this company, it's really great, they've got an opening for Boston, would you be interested? And if so, I'll recommend you. So it's really a very cool network of other people who are doing the job, who know who you are, know what your focus is, what your work style is, and then kind of, it's almost like dating. you know if your friend says, oh, I know this really great person that
Yeah.
you'd be you'd have great conversations, you love doing the same things. These tour companies really have personalities as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are massive industrial style, pushing out these tour groups one by one by one by one by one. And then there's others that are very small, very slow paced, have a focus on history, or have a focus on religion, or have a focus on food, and you can personalize your connection with them.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it is word of mouth, and a lot of it comes down to what your style of working is and what your interest level is in different regions.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. That's really cool.
It is.
I didn't know much about how that kind of process works before you just mentioned it there. So I don't know,
Yeah.
that definitely gets the wheels spinning in my head of like, oh, this might be something that sounds interesting to me. And you can definitely, it sounds like you can find something that's going to fit for you specifically, and there's a lot of different options out there.
There really are. Is so, I don't want to say easy, but it is so natural to find a niche, to find
Hmm.
your place, whether it's a geographical region, whether it's a theme, whether it's a demographic that you like talking to, if you like talking to senior citizens, or if you like kids. There's something out there for absolutely anyone who loves sharing.
Yeah, I love that. I'm definitely gonna have to follow up with you more after we're done talking here.
No problem at all.
Um,
Got
I'll,
lots of ideas to share.
yeah, yeah, I love it. So I want to go back to you mentioned you you followed the pilgrimage path.
Mm.
What was the name of it again?
It's called the Via Francigena.
Okay, so my first thought was you said it started in Canterbury, England, and ended in Rome.
Yes.
Um, how did that pilgrimage work with the English Channel in the way?
Well, it's kind of a planes, trains, and automobile kind of a thing, minus
Oh,
the planes. And actually, if you go to the true historic manner, it's minus the trains as well and automobiles. But you
mhm,
basically get from point A to point B following that route. And if you do it like as a purist, you have to do it on foot. But
mhm,
here's the thing, its basis is from history, of course, and a time period in history when the pilgrims had no option other than maybe a donkey cart. They
mhm,
had to go by foot. Horseback was something that was reserved for the people who were really well off. But most pilgrims would do it um, over the course of that length to walk from between those two places. And if you did it every single day for the full day, it takes about 3 months. That is not something that's short.
mhm.
Um, Nowadays, you have a set historic path, but you can choose how personalized you want to make it. You can decide to stop off, which I did on a couple of occasions, take little detours and visit other places that are slightly off the beaten path. Um, I was mostly interested in a particular section of that path. And so I wanted to get through some of the other ones a little faster. So
Mhm.
I said, well, I hear France is kind of flat before you get to the Alps. I'll just ride a bike through the French portions, and I'll get to the mountains. I'll ditch the bike and I'll start by foot from there. And that'll give me more time to explore Italy. That was
Mhm.
my whole excitement. Well, as these types of things do happen, nothing went according to plan. To get from Canterbury to what they use as the typical path is Calais on the French coast.
Okay.
There is a ferry now, and the idea was to take. I took the bicycle on the ferry and started riding once I got over to the French side.
Mhm.
Nowadays, you've got to do a little bit more research into it because that ferry that runs between those two ports has been going back and forth as to whether or not it would allow pedestrians or people with bicycles. It used to be you could just walk right onto those ferries. Now they're saying you have to have an automobile. So they've gone back and forth on that. It's not as straightforward as just going down to the port and catching a boat. You do have to
Mhm.
do some due diligence research.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. So how long did it end up taking you?
Well, I didn't have an alternative to the 3-month limit because as an American, the visa that you are visiting Europe on is something called a Schengen. Well, you're in the Schengen zone and you have 90 days tops before you have to leave the Schengen zone countries. And
Mhm.
once those 90 days are up, you have to wait another chunk of time before you can come back. So I managed to do it in spite of a whole bunch of weird injuries and odd uh, encounters, some involving hedgehogs and sick
Hedgehog.
nuns. There were, I think it was like a day or two below my 90 days that it
Wow.
took me to get where I wanted to go. Um, and I was quite creative in how I got through that path over the course of 90 days. Um, and I did have to skip some segments, which I then went back the following chunk of time that the Schengen allowed me in, and
Mhm.
I redid them. I redid the ones that I missed. So it's not something for the faint of heart. You really do need to commit to a trek like that. Although that being said, there's quite a few people who do it in segments. So they might have a 2-week holiday and they'll do a certain stretch. Then the following year, when they have their next 2-week holiday, they'll pick up where they left off and continue till they get as far as they get. So you
Mhm.
can do it in pieces like that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's kind of similar with the Camino de
You know,
Real.
yeah,
It is, yeah.
yeah.
Uh, and same thing with the I would think of the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail here in the
Hmm.
U.S. too.
And much like I was referencing with the tour companies having so many different unique personalities, it's like that with hiking trails, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like that with paths that you choose. The Camino is such a communal experience. It is a draw for people because of that, because they're able to meet people along the way. They're able to stay in hostels where other travelers are. There's a sense of safety
Hmm.
in numbers as well. Whereas the Via Francigena that I went on, in the entire 3 months, I didn't come across another pilgrim that was walking it or trekking it. And so you've got those two extremes with those two paths that I just mentioned. And there's something in between for everybody. You can find somewhere, some people are on there, some people aren't. You've got to sort out what type of experience you want to have
Hmm.
and then find the path. So I knew for a variety of reasons that I needed a solo experience. I needed to do this by myself and for myself. And so I chose the path that was less trod, both in poetic sense as well as realistic sense.
Hmm. Did you feel, talking about safety, did you feel safe along the path?
99.9% of the time, yes. Um, there were a few examples where the unsafeness that I felt was less an actual worry of physical harm and more of a comfort zone, getting out of my comfort zone kind of fear.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of that, I'd have to say. But then every now and again, you have to wonder if, because I was using GPS and tracking, and it didn't always work in some of the more remote areas. And so my reliance on the technology sometimes bit me on the backside because I followed a wrong road, or all of a sudden I'm faced with a fence that the path says I'm supposed to cross, but there's a very angry looking dog on the other side, kind of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's those types of issues, but having my phone with me or whatever device I would be carrying um, gave me a sense of comfort because I knew I could always either communicate if I was in an urgent need for help, or if I was lonely. There's that factor as well. You do this, or I did this anyways, to be a solo traveler, to have that alone time, but every once in a while it could get really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And the opportunity to call someone or to send somebody a message or even just to look something up online in an easy way
Mm-hmm.
was a comfort as well. And that for me was mitigating some of the concerns I had for safety. It made me feel like I had a close connection to a comfort blanket of sorts or a security support in the immediate vicinity for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. You could still do it alone, but you had options if you needed it.
Yep, exactly. I could be as alone as I wanted to be.
Mhm.
I think that's the best way of saying it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. um, yeah, I mean that sounds amazing, and now I'm writing this down, saying, oh, now I need to do that. My list just
Well,
keeps getting longer. It never gets shorter, no matter how much.
right, right. Well, you yourself and anybody who's listening to this who has any questions about this, who wants to chat through some of the problem solving aspects of approaching a task like this, please feel comfortable approaching me about it.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I always encourage people to reach out to all my guests on here. I mean, I really want this to be
Excellent.
a community, and I love the travel community because everyone is so welcoming and open. A lot
Mm.
of the times, it's a fun group to be a part of.
We're a dysfunctional family, but we're a family nonetheless.
Yeah, that's for sure. uh, yeah, so I know you worked as an archaeologist as well. What was that
Ah,
like?
yes. Ah, yes. That was actually how I first traveled internationally. That was my
Okay.
first experience going overseas. I had, I was studying in college, I was studying history, and I started really leaning in the direction of ancient history.
Mhm.
And one of my professors pulled me aside one day and said, look, if this is something that really interests you, you need to figure out right now if you're gonna want to be a dirt digger, if you're gonna want to do something like that for your life, for your career. And if that's the case, I can find you a really interesting scholarship. So I said, sign me up. And I went over a lot of these excavations recruit people to come and do the manual labor of the digging with this very romantic notion of volunteering. They'll have their academic staff and their managers in the field, But then they'll say, we need somebody to actually move the wheelbarrows, to lift the shovels, to, to do the sifting. And so they'll go out there and they'll look for all these quote unquote volunteers, but you really do have to pay for that experience. It's not like they bring you over on this great flight and they take care of you the entire time. You pay your way in most of these. But that's how I started. I started out as a history lover with more than surface knowledge, but still very book knowledge of what excavating was going to be like. And I got over there and I actually put my hands in the sand, in the dirt, and that was it. I was hooked. And I went back year after year, and I eventually was brought on staff. So it shifted from me paying them to them paying me. Although again, it's not something you really become rich off of. I think the first year that I did it, that I was paid for 2 months, I got the equivalent of about $600. So,
Wow.
but they fed me.
That's
so
nice.
so that was something. But it was over in Israel, in a city called Ashkelon, that I first got my nails dirty, and I inhaled. I sniffed deeply of that sand, and they say if you dip your toes in the Nile, or if you flip a coin in the Trevi Fountain, you're guaranteed to return. It's kind of the same when you lift a spade of dirt and you discover that you are touching something that hasn't seen the light of day for 3, 4, 5,000 years, and you're
Mhm.
a part of that discovery process. And holy cow, is the adrenaline surge.
See, that is a great sales pitch to become an archaeologist.
Well, it's not as, as adrenaline surging as Indiana Jones makes it look like, but it's pretty darn close.
Yeah, that honestly, after you just said that, I'm like, wow, an archaeologist. I didn't even think about that.
Oh man, I'm throwing you all kinds of career
I
opportunities here in
know.
India, aren't I?
I
And
love
then you
it.
can
I
throw
love
it all away and walk a trek, for a couple months as well. So,
it. Did you have any really exciting discoveries when you were there?
well, yes, but I'm not sure if it's as exciting for other people as it is for me. But um, I found some human remains. I found some gold. I found some, and Israel wasn't the only place. I ended up years later excavating over in Egypt as well, right at the base of the pyramids. Most of the sites that I was working on were not, in spite of the fact that I mentioned I found a piece of gold once, they were not these places of palaces. They were not, the grand architecture of the temples. They
Mhm.
tended to be the regular people's homes, the market areas, the kinds of buildings that the exciting stuff that you're finding are pottery jugs full of seeds that were burnt in a fire. And as a result of them being burnt, they're carbonized. Um, and so they last for thousands of years. Um, One of the layers that I was excavating at in Ashkelon was the layer that is mentioned in the Bible. There's a king called Nebuchadnezzar who kind of came down through the Levant countries and just ransacked everything, burnt the towns, knocked the structures down, and left a trail of mad, crazy reconstruction being necessary. But what people would do in ancient times, they didn't have land movers or bulldozers. They would literally just flatten everything down and build on top of it again. So the archaeologists, when we're coming down and we're slowly peeling these layers, we came across this town's entire destruction layer. Um, and that was pretty phenomenal to be able to say, wow, not only do we see this amazing stuff in front of us, but we have texts historical texts that tell us when this happened. We knew the date
Mhm.
and the year and the month that this took place. So that was pretty cool too.
Yeah, that sounds so cool. What a cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, and then one of the excavations over in Egypt that I worked on was the village that the workers who were building the pyramids were living in. So I was coming across
Hmm.
their meal pits, their garbage pits. I was coming across the rooms that they slept in. Another site that I worked on was the area where the very last pyramid that was ever constructed in Egypt was built. And oh, I had forgotten about this till this very moment. We actually found a modern, relatively modern murder victim um, alongside the
Wow.
pyramid that we were, the base of the pyramid that we were excavating. We thought that it was going to be an ancient human remains, and come to find out, it was somebody that he had died and just kind of sat down. And because we were in the desert, the sands just buried them, and they were mummified. And it ended up being somebody we dated it to about 200 years ago. Um,
Wow.
and we discovered them. We came across their toes first. Their toes popped up out of the sand, and yeah, it was like somebody who was you go bury your friends in the sand on the beach. That's exactly what it looked like at first.
That's so crazy. What an interesting discovery.
It was again one of those really random accidental situations that just seemed to happen to me.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of those sorts of accidents that happen when you travel. I feel like a lot it's happened to me personally too.
If we're lucky, honestly, because I truly believe, and my experience has been, that the more you plan and you expect one thing, your your preconceived ideas can get in the way.
Hmm.
I've gotten to the point now that when I do my own personal travel, I actually build in time to my schedule to go randomly get lost and to wander
Hmm.
and try and be surprised as opposed to planned. And some of my best memories are connected to those types of experiences that just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, yeah. That's where the real adventure begins, I think.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, I guess on that note, with between tour guiding and your own personal travel, how do you make all of that work from a schedule standpoint?
Not easily.
Yeah.
Not easily. I have to
I
admit
think.
it's been a challenge. It really has, because on the one hand, you want to make money, you want to earn money, and you want to do it doing the thing that you love. Um, but then how do you then balance that with having a home? If you want to have pets or plants, even as simple as that sounds, or having a love life, having a family. It's not an easy thing. Um, I'm still in the process of juggling that. I've been trying to for the last, well, minus the pandemic, since 2017. And I can't say I'm completely good at it, but the seasonal nature of the job gives you a little bit more flexibility. Well, a lot more flexibility than a 9 to 5er. And the
Mhm.
fact that I have chosen to be an independent contractor throws a bit of a wrench into it, because I am reliant on people offering me the opportunity to lead a group as opposed to actively marketing myself and recruiting guests to something I offer in my hometown.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of factors that make it not easy. But that having been said, I have a calendar that I fill. And if I want to block off a week to do my own thing, I'll do it. Um, my my partner, my sweetheart, he has some children that I've gotten very close to over the last few years. And when they have a school play, or if they have a holiday that I want to participate in, I block that off. And that's
Mhm.
considered my sacred personal time. I don't take any work during those blocks of time. I also know, going into building my year schedule, that the springtime is crazy busy, and I've got to grab as much work as I can then, because the winter time is almost empty and the opportunities for jobs are minimal. And so there's a certain aspect of grab it while you can. Um, but like I said, I'm still figuring it out. It's a juggling act. It is not something that comes naturally to everybody, and it certainly isn't coming naturally to me, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, I feel like that's, you just got to experience it, and a little bit of trial and error to figure it out.
Exactly. A whole lot of error.
Yeah. And then life situations change too, as things change in your own lives. You got to adjust with that as well.
Constantly. When I started this career path, I was single. And now I've got a life partner. So finding a way to dedicate the time necessary for that is important as well.
Yeah, yeah. What was that like? As you're traveling around and dating, while you're traveling, what was that experience for you?
When I first started it out, looking at it as an adventure. I was newly single at the time when I took that gap year that I was referencing
Hmm.
earlier. And I signed up. I knew the path I was going to take. I knew I was walking along this particular path and what the cities basically were that I was going to be on. And I had a rough idea of my timeline. So I signed up for as many online platforms, dating platforms as I could. Um, and I just kind of used it as a bit of a cultural learning experience. So I knew I'd be in Paris 2 weeks ahead of time, and I'd try and find some people who were going to be there at the same time as me on the website. And I'd say, hey, do you want to meet for a coffee in front of Notre Dame? Or do you want to show me um, the best pastry shop that you enjoy, having a croissant at, or something like that, something along those lines. And so I kind of built it in to my scheduling, and it was so much fun. I met some crazy interesting people. Um, and there was absolutely no pressure the way I was doing it, which was perfect for me because, online dating can be a little bit intimidating.
Hmm.
Um, but it really felt like I was just meeting some great local people, um, having some wine or some coffee or some beer or whatever, and sitting next to a great river and hearing what it's like to live in that city. So it was kind of like mini tours. I didn't even
Yeah.
have to consider them as dates so much, but and it worked out great for me considering where I was in life at the time. I wasn't looking for something serious. I wasn't looking for something that would last more than a cup of coffee or so. I
Mhm.
just really wanted to start talking with more people and having these interesting conversations with new faces.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of travel, is just meeting people from the place that you're in, or meeting fellow travelers.
Hostels are great for that, aren't they?
Hmm. Oh,
You know,
100%.
even if I mean, and granted, hostels and it have become a little bit pricier than they they used to
Yeah.
be, but still, even if I could afford a more expensive hotel, sometimes I just want that community that the hostel provides, and the opportunity to be able to, walk down to breakfast and ask somebody where they're going to adventure today in London,
Yeah.
or hear somebody else's story about where they went last night. And I love hostels for that reason.
Hmm. Yeah, I've had so many good experiences from staying in hostels, and
Right.
met people from all over the world, and it's just, I don't know, a lot of experiences that would have never happened had I just stayed in a normal hotel.
Exactly. Exactly. You think of the things you would have missed.
Hmm. For sure. Well, Amy, we talked about a lot of things today. Um, it's been fun. It's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed hearing your
Oh,
story.
thank you. Whirly
Yeah,
swirly for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like your life has been a ton of fun. Um, and I'm definitely jealous of all the things that you've gotten to do, but it's been inspiring for me to pursue, my passions of travel more as well. So I hope that translates over to the listeners as well.
Well, I hope so too, because, jealousy is only satisfying if it inspires somebody to do something about it, right?
Oh,
Um, if you say, "Well, I'm so jealous of your lifestyle," well, yeah, that's okay, but what you can do this. There's
mhm,
whether it's literally doing the same things or even just adding adventure to your life in your own neighborhood. Um, my most recent series of Instagram posts were really about that. I did a whole month of just, you know what, you don't have to buy that plane ticket. I was in a strange way, I was reminiscing about what I missed about the lockdowns. I know that sounds odd to say, but there was an element during those times of our lives that were so simple, that were so straightforward, where you could find adventure because you had to in your
mhm,
own cupboards, in your own, the shadows on the wall that the that the cobwebs were casting, or the little bit of frozen ice on the back of the refrigerator that just catches the light and has a little rainbow in it. There were things that you were seeking out during the pandemic, during the lockdowns, because you had to, but
mhm.
you don't have to anymore. But just because you don't have to doesn't mean they disappear. There is
Yeah.
so much you can expand in your home, in your neighborhood, in your town, to add adventure, to add exploring into your life. So rather than just say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous," or "I wish I could," or "I wish I was capable of," you can. And it doesn't
Mhm.
require you to go on an archaeological excavation. Sometimes it's just opening your eyes differently when you're walking to the grocery store.
Yeah. 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 And really, just to add on to that, I mean, with travel, I think it help you see those things in a different light.
Oh, I
I
hope so. I really hope so. That's the best thing about it.
Yeah, yeah. I know for me, every time I travel and then I come back home, I notice something different or I see something
Right?
differently.
Right?
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's hard to explain without actually experiencing it.
It's like a different set of glasses that you're wearing now.
Yeah, yeah.
Same
Um,
stuff, but you're seeing it differently.
hmm Yeah, and you've had those experiences that help you kind of think through it in a different way too.
Exactly. It's like learning a new language.
Yeah. I love it. This has been such an awesome conversation.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I did too.
I'm glad to hear that as well. Well, I guess I probably should wrap it up here. But any last comments or anything else that you want to share?
Yes, first of all, I want anyone who has any questions about anything we discussed to feel very comfortable reaching out if they want to continue or start and continue a conversation. I want to make it very clear that I'm open to encouraging conversation. So that's the
Mhm.
first thing. But secondly, yes, you don't have to have this massive adventure in front of you that looks like a life altering, one of a once in a lifetime type of trip. You can find ways to add adventure and exploring to your life without even leaving home. Whether it's a virtual tour, whether, I'm not saying that to plug it per se, but the idea that it's all perception, it's all perspective, what you count as adventure. And we learned deeply and resentfully to a certain extent during those years of the pandemic that we could look at things differently, that it wasn't just because we had to, but that it was possible to do, and enjoy it. So I'd want people to also look at exploring an adventure as not something that has to be grand,
Mhm.
that the small things can become grand, without even needing to leave home. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a good way to wrap it up here. Really quick, I will have you plug your stuff, where can people find you and reach out to you at?
Well, my website is tourguideguides.com. And on Instagram, I can be found at Tuesday at 2. And we can kind of go from there. We can connect on those platforms.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll when we post this, I'll make sure to tag you in it so people can find you easily too. But
Terrific.
yeah, again, Amy, thank you so much. It's been such a fun conversation.
Sure thing, Kyle.
Yeah,
Let's
really,
plan on
really
doing it
inspiring.
again soon.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I look forward to seeing you somewhere around the world soon, and I really hope we can connect again soon as well.
Probably in one of those hostels.
Probably. All right, Amy, have a good one.
All right, Kyle. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always check out every episode on Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, and now Amazon Music as well. Just search for Our Travel Experiences on any of those platforms and it will pop up. You can also find everything all in one place on my website, ourtravelexp.com. And if you want to see my travel pictures as well as travel pictures from guests on the show, you can check them out on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. And if you want to share your own pictures on the Instagram page or be a guest on the podcast, you can message me via that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to see your pictures and hear about your travel experiences, so please send them my way. And if that isn't enough for you, make sure to check out my weekly YouTube show, From Around the World Fridays. Every Friday, I'm taking 5 to 10 minutes to answer questions from listeners, share some souvenirs that I bought over the years, share my postcards over the years that I've accumulated, or share videos and pictures from one particular city or country that I visited, and so much more. So check it out, guys. You won't be disappointed. And make sure you go subscribe to that as well. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you somewhere around the world soon.